Delaware may be small, but it's full of mysteries. And if you look a little closer, you'll find that scattered across its unassuming landscape are ghost towns, abandoned settlements that have fallen silent over the centuries, forgotten farms, neglected churches, and crumbling remnants of railroads tell the story of a state shaped by ambition, conflict, and economic change. So, how did these once thriving communities vanish? What remains of Delaware's first settlement, doomed by the clash of the Lenape people? And how could an entire neighborhood disappear in the 21st century? Stay tuned to find out, as today we uncover the fascinating tales of Delaware's ghost towns. I'm your host Ryan Socash, and you're watching It's History. To understand the rise and fall of Delaware's ghost towns, we need to travel back, way back, to the origins of this land and the people who first called it home. The story of Delaware begins long before European settlers arrived. Archaeologists estimate that the first people inhabited the area at least 12,000 years ago. These early inhabitants left behind little more than traces of their lives, and it's likely that some chapters of Delaware's prehistory remain buried, still waiting to be uncovered. We do know that at one point, a group of people speaking a single ancient language, Proto-Algonquin, began to spread out and evolve into separate communities, each speaking distinct languages within the Algonquin family. Although their precise origins remain a mystery, scholars have pieced together their history using linguistic and archaeological clues. These groups settled widely across the eastern United States, establishing thriving communities long before European explorers arrived. In Delaware, the Nanticoke people based in the Delmarva Peninsula and the Lenape, who lived near the Delaware River and Bay, were among the most prominent. These tribes developed deep connections to the land, relationships with one another, and thriving trade networks. Fast forward to the early 1600s, and this land became the focus of European ambition. Before the English took control of it, it was the Dutch and Swedes who vied for dominance. The Lenape became intermediates between early European settlers, the Dutch and the Swedes, and the Susquehannock, another powerful tribe near the Susquehanna River in Pennsylvania. Despite these alliances, the balance of power began to shift. The first permanent European settlement in Delaware was a Dutch colony named Zwanadel, or Swan Valley, founded in 1631 near the Delaware Bay. Zwanadel, however, would not last long. A misunderstanding with local Native Americans escalated into violence, resulting in the settlement's destruction just a year after its founding. This would mark the land's first so-called ghost town. A tragic tale of ambition meeting misunderstanding, a story that we'll revisit shortly. Meanwhile, the Swedes established their own foothold in the area, founding the colony of New Sweden in 1638 at Fort Christiana in what is now modern-day Wilmington. Their dominance, however, was short-lived. In 1655, during the Second Northern War, the Dutch retook control of New Sweden, folding it into their new, larger colony of New Netherland in the process. But history had other plans. In 1664, English forces seized control of the region, setting the stage for Delaware's future as a part of British America. The English explorer Samuel Argall had already named the area Delaware in 1610, after Thomas West. However, later, the Duke of York gifted the land to William Penn in 1682, naming it the Lower Counties of Delaware. This land became critical for Penn's larger Pennsylvania holdings. Throughout the 1600s, Delaware's history was shaped by competition for resources, particularly furs. As a result, European settlers and native tribes clashed frequently as both parties sought control over this trade. These wars, combined with disease, both pushed the Lenape people out and declined their population dramatically. By the 1700s, Delaware's Native American presence was greatly diminished, leaving behind only scattered populations, many of whom moved westward. The colonists, meanwhile, built their own economy, first on tobacco plantations using enslaved labor, and later on more diversified farming practices. This economic evolution continued well into the 19th and 20th centuries as Delaware became an industrial hub, laying the foundation for Delaware's future ghost towns. Now that we've set the stage, let's turn our focus to Delaware's very first ghost town, Zwanadel, and talk about what doomed this Dutch colony to failure and what traces still remain. As we laid out a moment ago, the story of Delaware's first ghost town began in 1631, when the Dutch established Szwata near the Delaware Bay. This was their first attempt to claim the area, aiming to set up a whaling community that could take advantage of the bay's resources. Szwata was Delaware's first European settlement, founded by the Dutch in 1631, but within just a year, it was destroyed, leaving behind little but a tragic story. The settlement was part of a patroonship, a Dutch system where wealthy landlords, known as patroons, were granted large tracts of land to develop. With 28 settlers and structures made of wood, Szwata had the beginnings of a thriving community. There was likely a small fort, communal fields, and a storehouse for supplies. But in 1632, a misunderstanding with the local Native Americans turned violent. The Dutch had erected a column engraved with the arms of Holland to claim the land, a type of sacred national landmark. Anyhow, the trouble all started when a native chief removed the insignia, reportedly to make a tobacco pipe. The settlers took extreme offense. In an attempt to appease them, the tribe executed the chief responsible, sparking retaliation, then counter-retaliation, and on they went. In the end, the chief's followers attacked the settlement, killing every settler. As I said a moment ago, within just a year of its founding, Szwata was wiped out in a violent clash with Native Americans. This became Delaware's very first ghost town. So in 1685, when the area became part of William Penn's holdings, the town of Lewis was established nearby, erasing almost all traces of Szwata. And although the town itself is gone, hints of its history can still be found in Lewis. The Szwata Museum, built in 1931, stands as a tribute to this early colony. Its stepped gable architecture mimics traditional Dutch buildings, and a statue of the colony's founder stands proudly on top of it. The Szwata Museum in Lewis keeps the memory of the colony alive. Inside, you'll find exhibits about the settlers and their conflict that led to the tragic ending. Archaeologists have uncovered Dutch bricks and charred remains of structures, possibly from the settlement's destruction. While the evidence is sparse, these fragments connect us to this brief yet pivotal moment in Delaware's early history. The story of Delaware's ghost towns wouldn't be complete without examining the rise and fall of railroads and how they shaped communities. Let's take a closer look. As the U.S. industrialized, railroads became critical to transportation and commerce, transforming the towns they passed through along the way. In Delaware, railroads didn't connect existing communities. They created new ones. But when these lines fell out of use, the towns disappeared with them. With that in mind, the Delaware Railroad, which opened in 1855, was the first to span the state. Initially connecting Porter to Dover, the line soon extended southward to Seaford, covering the entire state with just a few tracks. This north-south line spurred the development of towns like Greenwood in 1858, where railroads brought trade and opportunity. In the late 19th century, the Pennsylvania Railroad acquired these tracks and began consolidating smaller lines, including Queen Anne's Railroad. Unlike the Delaware Railroad, Queen Anne's took a horizontal path across the state, linking up with Baltimore, Maryland, which could extend passengers north to Cape May, New Jersey. Anyhow, along the way, it also created new towns, such as Owen Station. Owen Station is a perfect example of a town created by Queen Anne's Railroad. Today, it's little more than a memory, but its story shows how trains built and then erased communities. Owen Station thrived thanks to its location along the tracks. The town was small but functional, with homes, a train station, and a community church. These days, a few scattered foundations remain, leaving the rest to the imagination. However, a nearby car route follows what used to be a part of Queen Anne's Railroad, hinting at the town's once central role in local commerce. Another ghost town along these lines was St. Johnstown, but its story is quite different. Unlike Owen Station, St. Johnstown was hindered by the railroads. With major trade moving to Greenwood, locals abandoned St. Johnstown, leaving it to fade into obscurity. Founded as early as 1776, this community once had homes, a thriving church, and a central role in the region. Today, only a handful of historic houses remain, one of which is linked to the infamous slave trader, Paddy Cannon. The town's church initially started as a makeshift gathering in the woods, but it soon became a focal point for the town. with the congregation eventually building a permanent preaching house in 1786, followed by an even larger church in 1872, structures which reflected the community's deep connection to faith. Now, if we fast forward all the way to 1952, with the opening of the Chesapeake Bay Bridge and the decline of the railroads, the town simply faded away. Today, the railroads that once defined these communities are abandoned, leaving ghost towns like Owen Station and St. Johnstown as mere relics of Delaware's past. The story of Delaware's most recent ghost town takes us to Glenville, a small community in Newcastle County, just 8 miles southwest of Wilmington. Located on the Bread and Cheese Island, Glenville was once a quiet suburban neighborhood nestled near the historic town of Stanton, a site with deep roots dating all the way back to English settlement in 1679. For centuries, this area remained an active part of Delaware's landscape. But for Glenville, everything changed when disaster struck. The first warning sign came in 1999, when Hurricane Floyd caused widespread flooding in the area. Glenville sat precariously on a floodplain, near waterways like Red Clay Creek, and so the disaster was just a matter of time. Tropical Storm Henry delivered the final blow in 2003. With the flooding becoming an ever-present threat, the state and local governments stepped in, buying out the residents and helping them relocate to safer ground. By 2004, Glenville was officially abandoned. Houses stood empty, many bearing haunting messages painted on their walls, pleading for buyers who would never come. The following year, the town was demolished entirely, erasing Glenville from the map. These days, only fenced-off remnants remain where Glenville once stood. The area's overgrown and off-limits, leaving its secrets hidden beneath the surface. Although Glenville's story is tragic, it stands out among Delaware's ghost towns for having a bittersweet ending. Unlike earlier communities that were simply left to decay, Glenville's residents were given an opportunity to rebuild their lives elsewhere, a modern solution to a timeless problem. Delaware's ghost towns tell the story of ambition, tragedy, and resilience. From Szwata's violent demise in the 1600s to Glenville's abandonment in the face of rising waters, these places reveal how history can leave lasting marks on the land, and sometimes wipe it clean. And though these towns may be gone, it's my hope that their stories will never be forgotten. Before wrapping up today, I wanted to invite you guys over to my Patreon page, especially those of you who like to comment about my pronunciation issues. This one was tough with words like Szwata. This is your opportunity to help me out at the correct my pronunciation level, where you can offer me direct feedback or even criticism, and I guarantee you a personal response. But don't worry, I'd actually much rather have supporters than critics, so everyone's welcome to come and visit. The page offers some fun things like extended cuts and exclusive content. I'm calling it Tours of Urban Decay, so kind of side adventures that we're taking, dedicated episodes just for that area, an environment where I don't have to play for the algorithms of the internet. So it's real, it's authentic. I hope that you will click the link somewhere on the screen here or scan the QR code if you are watching this episode on a television. It would mean the world to me if you guys joined that. We can form a community, make this channel into something far greater than it already is. Otherwise, until next time, I'm Ryan Socash, signing off.